Thanks for settling in. Well, we've saved the best for last. We have a panel on psychedelics, inclusion, and diversity that I'm very honored to help moderate. My name is Jennifer Fernández. I'm a psychologist here in San Francisco. I provide harm reduction psychotherapy for adults, teens, their families, and I work with Latinx communities and with the LGBT community as well. And I'm also author of a new harm reduction workbook called Power Over Addiction. I just want to introduce the panelists quickly and then give you a short overview of what they'll be presenting on. First up, we'll have Madrone Stewart. She's author of The Feminist Weed Farmer, Growing Mindful Medicine in Your Own Backyard, and a PsyD student at the Wright Institute. The books are available in the back for a donation of $0 to $10, and all of the proceeds will go to Chacruna. Next up, we would have Cristie Strongman. She attends the Teachers College at Columbia University. She studies counseling with a multicultural and bilingual psychotherapeutic approach in English and Spanish. She's originally from Panama and is a trained opera singer. She'll be talking on decolonizing psychedelics for Latinx and Afro-Caribbeans. Then we'll have Kevon Adrian Simpson. He's founder of the Entheogen Integration Circle in New York City. He's a two-spirit medicine man within the plant medicine paths of Peru, a psychedelic world traveler, and a multidisciplinary artist born into a Jamaican lineage of healers. And he'll be presenting on the voices of the underground, why legalization is important in minority communities. And then lastly, we'll have Kufikiri. He's an artist, dancer, singer, actor, poet, martial artist, visual graphic designer, event manager, production manager, and a brand consultant. As a creative and a healer, he works to empower. And he'll be talking about deconstructing false belief systems, upholding racial barriers in the psychedelic community. So please join me in welcoming up first Madrone Stewart.
Okay, first of all, thanks for having me. This has been an amazing conference, and I'm really honored to be here. And first, I just wanted to express that my intention for being here is that I deeply believe in plant medicine, and I believe in plant medicine for all people and by all people. And part of that is because I feel like the cultivation of plant medicine is deeply meaningful work, especially if it's done in an ethical way. And yeah, so I hope that the future of psychedelics is clearly we are thinking about inclusivity, not only for the consumer end, but also for those of us who are bringing the medicine to people. Today I'm going to do a presentation of the book that I wrote, Feminist Weed Farmer, Growing Mindful Medicine in Our Own Backyard, and it's due out in September. And this is my first time speaking about the book, so I'm nervous. Okay, so I first wanted to talk about the three catalysts for writing the book. And it happened in a nonlinear way, so I felt like this crowd would be receptive to that. And the first is that I had been farming for about 5 years in a tiny town, about 600 people in northeastern Humboldt County. It's on the Klamath River. It's incredibly beautiful and incredibly rural. And after being there for long enough, it was just so isolating that it was time for me to return to the Bay Area where I'm from. And but the farm was going well, and so I decided I was going to hand it over to some friends. It's called Purple Kite Farm, and with a very psychedelic kind of reference to that. And so I had two friends of mine actually came to me during a journey, and these are the two. And they happened to be radical fairies. And I thought, okay, I want them to do this, and I think that they'll really enjoy it, that they've never actually cultivated before. And so I need to write them a cultivation guide that speaks to who we are and our values, and also in contrast to the more bro culture. We call it bro culture in Humboldt. That is about pumping in the chemicals and having huge yields, and often ends up being very heteronormative, sexist. There's a lot of problems. So anyway, I wanted a guide that would reflect us as a team. So I wrote for them Another kind of catalytic moment was I was walking around North Oakland with my partner and looking at, and I was helping him learn how to cultivate in his backyard in Oakland. And we're walking around North Oakland, and I thought, what if all of these backyards had a couple plants? And the people who lived here, who are Chinese grandmothers or just, of all different ethnicities and genders and sexual orientations, and what if everybody had access to this medicine? And we could make salves and tinctures and share it and heal each other. How beautiful would that be? Kind of comes out of my favorite book, The Fifth Sacred Thing, but that's another story. And then the final was the just disheartening process of cannabis legalization and the corporatization of this industry. And I was just in Humboldt yesterday. I was there all week, and it's very, very sad. The small farms are closing, and the farms that were started by people who dropped out and went back to the land and created a different vision, calm down, they're closing. And it's terrifying, and it's really sad. And so I'm personally for boycotting the corporate cannabis industry and for growing our own medicine and sharing it amongst ourselves. So to just have an alternative. And so those are some reasons why I sat down and wrote this book. And so now I'm just going to read a little bit from the book. And it starts with a quote from, I like to call him my psychedelic uncle, Terence McKenna. Cannabis is a catalyst of the imagination, is a quote that I start with. Cannabis is a powerful plant medicine that can be used to cultivate personal, cultural, and social transformation. Being stoned shifts your perspective, it expands your consciousness, and it helps us to see with more clarity who we are and the cultures in which our lives are embedded. It can also inspire creativity, the process of visioning, which are at the heart of any deep transformation. For women, this experience of expanded consciousness, insight, and stimulated creativity can be profoundly feminist. This altered state of consciousness can also help us to see oppressive and cultural practices more clearly, as well as the process of challenging these practices. Perhaps most importantly, cannabis can help women develop a vision for ourselves and our societies beyond these unjust practices. Skipping down. At its greatest, I believe that a feminist experience is when a woman becomes entirely the person she needs to be. Cannabis, DMT, mushrooms, ayahuasca, and LSD, among other entheogenic plants and compounds, can help us to illuminate these invisible prisons that society has created for us, which prevent us from thriving. I believe that growing and getting high on cannabis and other psychedelics can help to wake us up to who we are, how society is actively constraining our dreams, and they can help us illuminate pathways to liberation and self-actualization. Because of the increasingly grim and ethically abhorrent nature of the cannabis industry, I believe that all people should consider growing their own plant medicine. We desperately need to decentralize and diversify who is growing one of the most important medicines available to humanity. We cannot end up with a small handful of corporations growing our weed indoors using extremely energy-intensive cultivation methods and coating them with toxic chemicals. I especially believe that women, queer folks, and folks of color should grow our own psychedelic medicine because of how radically excluded we are from the emerging cannabis industry. I deeply believe that we need to empower ourselves with the skills and knowledge to grow the plants that help us to develop the wisdom that we need to liberate ourselves and our communities. We must stop supporting industries that are excluding our participation and are working against our values. This includes the emerging cannabis industry. I believe that you, dear reader, can grow the dankest, stickiest, tastiest, loudest, highest vibration cannabis on the planet. I believe that together with the support of your friends and family, you can free yourself from the stranglehold of dispensaries by growing your own beautiful pot plants. I want to breathe life into your dream. I believe that you were born to take the power in your heart, mind, skin, and bones, and use it to make great art, build beautiful relationships, and grow amazing plants. I want weed, kale, tomatoes, sunflowers, and echinacea cultivated in every backyard, terrace, and rooftop. I would love for the corporate-controlled cannabis farms to fail, and I would love to see women and genderqueer cultivators put them out of business. This will only happen if we all roll up our sleeves and sow our own seeds of insight, freedom, beauty, and dignity. I believe that psychological freedom goes hand in hand with economic freedom from corporations. So I'm going to skip to... Okay. So this is about passing the baton, because I think that mentorship is really important. I think that speaking publicly is one thing, but actually holding someone's hand and showing them how to do something is also, well, it's just invaluable. So talk about how that happened for me. My formative gardening teacher was a Zen Buddhist monk who was the garden manager of the land where I was doing work practice. She was intelligent, strong, very organized, and had a great eye for beauty. Every day before work, she would lead a short Buddhist prayer as one of the garden crew members lit incense and led a series of vows to Kuan Yin, the Buddhist goddess of compassion. My work with this teacher inspired within me the belief that gardening was a practice of Dharma, or the unity of wisdom and compassion. It requires great wisdom to understand the seasonal cycles of the earth, how these cycles affect plants in general, and the specific needs of each plant. It takes compassion to tend to each plant according to their unique needs in order for them to flourish. My formative cannabis cultivation teacher was a young mountain woman with a spicy personality. She hired me one season to manage her harvest so that she could focus her energy on activism related to indigenous water rights. She was a badass. She worked closely with me so that I understood every step of the cultivation and harvest process. During harvest, I was empowered to run her farm while she was away at conferences and work. I did not feel prepared for such responsibility. I took what she had taught me and did the best that I could. Without that experience of making all the big decisions, I do not think I ever would have started my own farm. I felt like this woman passed on the cannabis farming baton to me. I am now passing it on to you. The skills that you need to cultivate might feel overwhelming, but I believe in you, just like my two garden teachers believed in me. Here's a short anecdote about harvest. Harvest is a sacred time for a cannabis grower. It is a time of year when the nights begin to cool and the leaves of trees begin to glow bright red, orange, and yellow before they drop to the earth. Summer gardens die back, and evening fog begins to snake through the mountain valleys and down city streets. Your cannabis plants will probably start to yellow as your flowers, or colas, mature. Once your flowers are ripe, they will reach a peak state, and then the plant will die back. Harvest is a time marked by both abundance and death. Perhaps most importantly, for a grower, it is a magical time when all the energy of the sun, water, moon, earth, your heart, and your veganic fertilizers are concentrated into the psychoactive crystals coating each flower. Once ripe, each cola is clipped from its mother plant and processed so that the unique integrity of each flower is perfectly preserved. If you properly harvest and cure your flowers, all of the cosmic energy that went into their formation will be held within each flower until you set them ablaze in a joint, a bong, or a pipe. As a backyard grower, you probably will not need to organize a trim scene. However, as you cut down your plants and hang your flowers in your dry shed, take a moment to connect with the spirit of thousands of women who have gone through these tasks year after year on small farms throughout California, Oregon, and Washington. Many of us experienced community and reveled in the experience of camping out for several months while making a bundle of money to fund our art projects, graduate school tuitions, and trips to India and Bali. However, we all knew we were risking our safety. As you pull in your harvest, connect with the women who have done this work before you. These are your ancestors, and we want to support you. And I'll conclude with a bit from the conclusion. A little poem I wrote: celebrate this ordinary event of disintegration, disorientation, this moment before the beginning. The end of the first season of cultivation is a time to slow down. Temperatures have dropped and rain is falling. You might even be blessed with snowfall. Now is the time to pull out your cozy blankets, turn the kettle on, and start binging on Netflix. Or for God's sake, make some art. For cannabis cultivators, winter is a quiet time in which we can reflect on the past cultivation season and prepare for the upcoming year. This winter will mark the end of the first season growing outdoors and the beginning of a lifetime of cultivating cannabis, and hopefully many other nourishing and psychoactive plants. Let's skip to the end. Winter is also a fantastic time to dive deep into your mind with the help of the cannabis that you grew. I strongly suggest altering your mind with the intention of cultivating insight, joy, and relaxation. I also suggest altering your mind in a place where you feel comfortable and safe. The best way to induce paranoia and/or a bad trip is by getting high in a sketchy place. With the right mindset and setting, you can tap into the phenomenal power that this plant medicine has to offer your personal growth and your perspective on social and cultural constructs. This world needs as many woke women as it can get, and if cannabis helps to shift your mind so that you can wake up to your own power, your dreams, internalize oppressions, and strategies for liberation, then I want you to take time out to get high. If cannabis helps you to feel more creative, more in tune with yourself and your community, or if it helps you relax in the midst of this world full of suffering, then I hope that you can take time out to connect with this mystical plant medicine. If cannabis empowers, relaxes, brings joy and insight to you, then I wholeheartedly encourage you to set aside time to enjoy smoking weed as a feminist experience. This book is a gift to you, and I hope that you have learned something from the words tucked between its covers. This book was not written for your academic exploration of cannabis cultivation. It is intended to motivate you to actually do things in this world. It is a call to action. I would like nothing more than for you to get into your garden and experiment with what you have learned here. And I hope that you experiment with germinating seeds, paying close attention to the life cycle of your plants, smoking your own homegrown weed, and extending the spirit of generosity to your community. I hope that you use your cannabis to take psychonautic adventures that are empowering and liberating. I hope that these experiments are successful and that you emerge from this experience feeling happier, healthier, and stronger. I also hope that all of us homegrowers give dispensaries a run for their money. Why let them control the medicine supply when we can happily cultivate our own? Have fun out there.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cristie, and I'll be talking about decolonizing psychedelics for Latinos and Afro-Caribbeans. But first, I need to thank Bia and Gregory for asking me to speak here. Thank you. First and foremost, I want to tell you a little bit about myself so that you know where I'm coming from. I want to give you an idea of who is speaking, who I am racially, what my heritage is, and where I am from originally. Because these internal components constructed the lenses from which I observe and decode the world around me. They help me make sense of what I see. My viewpoint on race, privilege, and inequality is as a Latin American woman who experienced some privilege in my native country of Panama, due to being of lighter skin and due to my European American heritage, as well as the perception of whiteness that my English last name communicated about me when I lived in Panama, my birth country, and where I lived until the age of 8. I also lived in Germany and in Texas with my parents before making the solo move to New York City to perform as an opera singer. Both my parents were born in Panama, yet neither of them appeared characteristically Panamanian, equaling them, giving them some privilege. I look like my mother, but for the sake of the talk at hand, I'll be concentrating on my father's racial mixture and his attitude about it. My paternal grandmother was born in the Caribbean island of St. Lucia and had a relatively privileged life there as a light-skinned woman with Black features. For example, she had piano and organ lessons as well as classical singing lessons during most of her childhood and adolescence. My grandfather was an American of British ancestry. To me, my father resembles some of the lesser-known pictures of the young Malcolm X. To my grandmother, a child that looked in any way Black was not a good thing, and she would make him suffer due to that, as well as for being a reminder that she had been pregnant with him during the time that her husband abandoned her. My grandmother, being a light-skinned, very proud woman from the Caribbean island, could not tolerate the looks of my father because they were too much of a reminder of the part of her that she was trying so hard to forget. Due to this, my father grew up with a great deal of self-loathing that he would then project onto others with disdain in the same way that his mother flung onto him. My parents divorced when I was 5, and my mother remarried a German-American serviceman when I was 8 years old, thus taking his new family to Germany, where he became stationed after Panama. The uprooting from my home country of Panama to Germany and later to the US shook my sense of identity to the core from a very young age. It would take some time for me to figure out how it was that my identity would change due to geography, depending on the perceptions of others about race and class, and how this would dictate how I would be viewed and treated. This felt very puzzling to me. Why was I treated differently? I began to see slowly the privilege I had when I lived in Panama, when I didn't even realize it, that I had it. I was determined from the moment that I saw this, from a very young age, to even out the scales of justice for all by exposing the system that grants access of visibility and that can also convert it into invisibility. So I'll be covering 3 points. The first one will be issues around inclusion of people of color in psychedelic studies. The second will be the value of minorities, specifically the historical value of Black life. And the third point, hoarding opportunity, determined by socioeconomics and class. My first point regarding inclusion. I will begin with a research article published this year, 2018, in the journal BMC Psychiatry, entitled Inclusion of People of Color in Psychedelic-Assisted Psychotherapy, a review of the literature, by Dr. Monica Williams at the University of Connecticut, along with her colleagues. These researchers analyzed international psychedelic research studies from the years of 1993 to 2017 and conducted an evaluation of the ethno-racial differences in inclusion in the effective methods utilized for recruiting people of color. Only studies that utilized methodological rigor and met the standards current ethical research guidelines were used. Out of these 18 studies that met the criteria, the researchers determined that there were no significant differences in the recruitment methodologies between those studies, even those that showed higher rates of inclusion. The most problematic issue that is highlighted in these insignificant differences in recruitment methodologies to include people of color is that it overlooked the unique way in which mental health issues present in people of color. This is most likely due to the hegemonic representation of mental illness symptomology for a non-diverse representation of the population, which unfortunately has come to be accepted by even the medical complex system. This underscores the question, how can we recruit, retain, and understand, much less help, Blacks and Latinos with psychedelic-assisted psychotherapies if the science does not recognize the unique presentation of mental illness symptomology within a cultural and racial context? Some might still wonder, why is it imperative to include and to ensure the inclusion of people of color in research studies? The answer to that lies firstly in that we have a duty to ensure that minorities and women be included in representative numbers in studies by adhering to the Rehabilitation Act of 1993, passed by Congress, that mandates this inclusion for all studies conducted and supported by the NIH. Simply put, Without the adequate inclusion of racial and ethnic minorities in studies, the research fails to fully represent the demographic of the country they are researching. As the researchers of this article conclude, inclusion of minorities in future studies at the improved recruitment strategies are necessary to better understand the efficacy of psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy in people of color and provide with all equal opportunity for involvement in this potentially promising treatment paradigm. According to the U.S. Census Bureau record for 2017, the nation's Black population is 12.3%. That is 74.5 million. For Latinos in the U.S., still the 2017 Census Bureau states, Latinos constitute 17.8% of the population in this country. That is 57.5 million. The Hispanic population of the United States as of last year, as of 2016, makes people of Hispanic origin the nation's largest ethnic or racial minority. So why is it then that organizations doing research in the U.S. are still struggling to recruit and retain study participants for their research studies, so their research will adequately represent the population demographics of the United States? This leads me to my second point, the value of minorities. From a historical perspective, specifically the historical value that of Black people in the U.S., what they have been made to bear. It can be said that we pay attention to people and things that we uphold as valuable. What can be said about the people and things that we don't think have value? We discard what we don't see as having any value. Therefore, I would suggest that the lack of adequate inclusion of minorities in psychedelic research, or any other research for that matter, or at least their retention after their recruitment in research studies, begs the question, what is the perspective held by those in power about their value and place in the world of Blacks and Latinos? By not including them, are those with power saying that they don't consider minorities as part of their demographical society and world? Is this oversight indicative of the invisibility of color? That old but still pervasive slogan, see no color? In other words, I don't want to look at you or acknowledge your presence as a person of color in my world. That might sound very harsh, but this is the picture that the lack of inclusion paints very clearly to those on the other side looking in. Dana Ramey Berry, one of the authors whose work is included in the book Slavery's Capitalism, A New History of American Economic Development, talks about the historical value of Black life during slavery. She reminds us that historically, Black bodies were only valued as commodities to the slave owner, the one with power. Even after death, sometimes the slave owner could collect lost wages that he could claim he lost when his property died. Their value was as a human property only. Although slavery and capitalism are interrelated and slavery has been abolished, there still remains the painful legacy of it in our society, in our prison system, in the minds of many about the value of Black life. My third point, hoarding opportunity. Hoarding opportunity is what author Richard Reeves uses to refer to the socioeconomic divide between classes in his book entitled Dream Hoarders, How the American Upper Middle Class is Leaving Everyone Else in the Dust, Why That Is a Problem, and What to Do About It. Various forms of opportunity hoarding among the upper middle classes make it harder for others to rise up to the top rung. Some examples of this include zoning laws and schooling, occupational licensing, college application procedures, the allocation of internships, and overall visibility. The result of this is not just an economic divide, but a fracturing of American society along class lines, resulting in a less competitive economy, as well as a less open society that respects all people. In closing, I'd like to leave you with some questions to ask yourselves, myself as well. We are each a barometer of the climate of visibility or of invisibility. Consider these questions. How inclusive are you in your own life? When was the last time you gave the space for someone unlike yourself to tell you about their experience, and you didn't correct them for how they felt if it was not positive? Do you look for ways to make things less challenging for people who don't have the same opportunities that you have? If we do not find ways to include and value others that we perceive unlike ourselves when in pursuit of what is most important to us, then we are in essence devaluing ourselves and sadly then distancing the knowledge and the healing that we pursue in psychedelic studies. I leave you with this. Let's value our collective selves by excluding nothing as we continue to embark in the pursuit of the more healing and knowledge that we know is waiting to be further uncovered in the world of psychedelics. Thank you.
We pour libation to our collective ancestors that wanted peace.
Have you ever sold something you thought you could never get back? Like the path to yourself or the heart to your map? Waking up looking left and right, trying to remember where you've been? Smelling like a bunch of dirty chemicals, cigars, and a bottle of gin? Lost in the forests of the world, trying to find your way home. But home was never home, so the very search makes you roam. Until you're in an HIV positive homeless shelter and he offers you a meth pipe and you realize your whole world can change, one wrong choice, one wrong night. And all you want to say is fuck it, because you know the world did you wrong. And the only way you made it out was doing these journeys, writing these poems and singing these songs. People are coming to me for hope. Scars on my face from being hate crime choked. And another brother offered me dope just so I couldn't sing or pray or write any more notes. So I had to notebook a new reality like an artist on tour. Maybe I'm saying something new, maybe you never heard it like that before. Fast forward, free falling, almost tumbling over the speed of my dreams. Rocket ship, they ask me to slow down, but the sky is not as far as it seems. Don't be offended, it's just my broken bars aiming for the stars. I'm Dogen focused, when I'm aiming up, I'm aiming past Mars. Some only want to remember me chewing the gutter with my teeth. I just hope they never have to use their bodies to not be homeless on the street. Life path number 11 in the year of 11. Guess I'm just vibrating angel frequencies from heaven. Soaking up the energy of my native land through my feet, Jamaica. Remembering distant memories left in star systems where constellations meet like streets. Third eye eclipse, totality open, staring at the sun. Galactic clock, star systems hidden in my blood, hun. I'm about to go deeper than I ever did before, with ancient keys and mysteries knocking on all secret doors. But it starts in a simple place with a simple question, man. Who am I? Who are we? And how can we take a better stand? It starts in a simple place with a simple question, man. Who am I? Who are we? And how can we take a better stand? I'd like to start with a quote by Bayard Rustin, who organized the March in Washington, advisor to Dr. Martin Luther King, two-spirit in his own right. When an individual is protesting society's refusal to acknowledge his dignity as a human being, his very act of protest confers dignity upon him. When an individual is protesting society's refusal to acknowledge his dignity as a human being, his very act of protest confers dignity upon him. And a second quote by Dagara Elder, Malidoma Somé. At this point in our history, we're being asked to exercise as much flexibility as possible. Rigidity is not going to help us move forward. And it has come to a point where the urgency of the revival of ritual is so important that gender cannot be an issue. I'm Kevon, hi. I could be a little intense. I've been waiting like all weekend, you know what I'm saying? I'm an underground shaman of New York City that started a group in my bedroom called the Entheogen Integration Circle that is now being appreciated internationally. I almost don't even believe it, but that's what's happening. I started the group as a way to get people to quietly find out about ceremonies happening in the city so that a portion of the population left out of research that I was studying online would gain access to transforming plant teacher moments. What I thought would be a much easier thing became a challenge without a structure of support. When I began, I didn't know such circles existed. Needless to say, I was overwhelmed by the people who started coming to me. Members of the LGBTQI community suffering from meth addiction, PTSD war veterans, and those fighting cancer. I will start with one of my stories before I go into very quickly some of theirs. When I found myself living in a building created for HIV positive males, a homeless shelter, third floor, the biggest room I ever had in my life, actually. The room was pretty nice. I was there for 2 months, and in the second month, third week of the second month, or maybe second week, I was like, oh, Great Spirit, why are you bringing me here? What is my mission and my role here? And I gleaned the understanding that I was sent to that part of Brooklyn, one of the most forgotten neighborhoods in Brooklyn, Brownsville, Brooklyn. It's very rough. People downstairs asking how much is a chicken wing. I thought the lady downstairs was being nice. From my window, she was a prostitute. You know, I thought she was being pleasant. She was thinking wrong tree. I decided in a space where Incense was not allowed, mapacho was not allowed, palo santo was not allowed, to go on a 9.78 gram high dose mushroom experience with 2 teaspoons of ayahuasca tossed in and an MAOI cacao for the mushroom to be like super powerful. I wanted to get to the bottom of things. I never wanted to be there again. And it was my understanding that I was helping create or open a portal of energy that had not existed in that neighborhood ever before. And in that visionary experience with, usually I'm singing for people, so I had to play Icaros through my phone. In that visionary experience, I got to see, like as real as you guys are here for me right now, the social constructs, the thoughts, the scorn, the silence, all of the things that we do to ignore people like myself. But it was displayed as objects in the space. And it was stomach turning. And I threw up over and over and over again. And I just kept screaming at the top of my lungs with my meth-addicted roommate and the other brother who was in the building, in the apartment. This is what you do to people who are here to love as deeply as this. This is what we create. A building designed for them to die in and be forgotten. I began knocking on the window. Can anyone hear me? Can anyone hear me? I want to die. I don't want to live anymore. I want to die. Why is my community letting me be here? And this went on for hours. My suicidal ideation had not gone that deep before. Second story. Our dear community sister, Karina Rivera, who when I met was a bubbling, joyous beacon of light and feminine grace in our circle with her little buffalo rattle and helping you blow your nose. She was diagnosed with cancer on her birthday, 2 years after our working together. And then I watched. I watched her waste away in front of my eyes. Though I was able to help her release some of the junk in the heart that gets in the way of the body's health. And she fought so hard. In the end, it was just time to let go. And it was hard for us all to see. Turn that phone off. I was doing an extended stay in Peru. And I had to fly back after 2 months and spoke to my doctor, and she's like, "Oh, we got a smaller pill for you to take, for your virus and so on." I was like, "Yeah, a smaller pill is a good idea." And I was like, "Well, how do you deal with your clients who have deep emotional issues or deep health issues, and how do you detach as a doctor?" And we had this beautiful conversation. She said, "Maybe the spirit is dragging you back here to New York, interrupting your Sacred Valley trip in Peru to see your friend one last time." And I saw her in that bed with the bumps all over her skin from chemo that was done too late. And we sung a little song together. I won't sing the whole thing because I do want to share some more. It's a song I learned from my maestro in Iquitos. It's Siro wangro konete e panete. Siro wangro konete e panete. And it was the last song we would ever sing together. And I knew it was goodbye. She didn't know it was goodbye. Her family didn't know, but I knew. And that was one of the most important stories I came to share. And there's stories of people who come to me to quit their SSRIs and even war veterans who come to heal just the trauma of training to then go kill people. The training is traumatic. We have to do something differently, guys. Where I'm from, it's an emergency. So while we are thinking about how to include people like myself, we're doing the work. I started doing the work because I read, some of Catherine McLean's work online, and I was like, okay, well, how are they doing this thing? They're getting the people in the room, they're making a playlist, and they're giving them the drugs. Okay. So I guess that's what I'll do. It sounded easy enough, And then strange things started happening in a ceremonial space, as you can imagine, the shifting of energies and the visitation of spirit and things that are ineffable. I share these stories with you to ignite your imagination. If a first-generation immigrant from Jamaica who grew up in Brooklyn, New York City can help on this level from information diligently searched for online, then tested on self before sharing with others, then what will be possible with different laws that protect those who do this work in place? What becomes possible when the space is not a secretive invitation-only bedroom, but an actual facility with finances? And to close, I'm just going to sing one more song. Two children were walking out under the sun, said one to the other, from where have we come? I read all the books and the writings of others. I've asked all my loved ones, my sisters and brothers, please. Tell me, oh tell me, for I seek the truth. I need a commitment, I fear for my youth. And as the moment unraveled in the arms of the sky, came a whisper of wonder wrapped in this reply. The road may be winding, unfamiliar, it's true, but the answers you seek are written in you. The words and the writings can be used as your marks, but remember the flowers, the wind and the stars. Be sure in your footing, the road never wanes. And the one thing that's certain is unchanging change. And that you are already what you seek to become. For you, my love, are a child of the sun, child of the sun, child of the sun.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I also would like to just begin by acknowledging that everyone's gathering here as its own sign of intention and awareness. Thank you to Bia for having me here. It's hard to get free when the government treats you like animals on safari. A nation with a ruling class focused on self-preservation using tactics that are draconian. Posting pictures of your plight won't help you take flight from the predators of the night. Whether your politics lean left or right, the money has the power and we're left to fight for what's right. Politics from the pulpit don't always fit. You can't feel the revival when your mind is predicated to You can't feel the revival when your mind is predicated to only thinking about survival. Hard to celebrate life when every child is dead on arrival. These flooded streets of pain have drowned out my smile. When you're raising yourself, you don't have time to be a child. You grow bigger, but you don't grow up. The traps of your past have got you stuck. Stuck up and beat down. They jacked your shine and stomped your heart onto the ground. Live by the lead, die by the lead. Folks woke up at your wake, telling you the things they wish they said before you were dead. Only mamas clutching dead babies cry, wonder why the light was taken out their child's eyes. Pastors preach sermons to help the healing, but the tragic loss makes the words feel like a lie. Faces on t-shirts so they aren't out of sight, out of mind. You got bars on the windows like you're the one doing time. Children can't play outside. Last week there was another drive-by. So much life lost you stop asking why. Numb to the pain you carry inside. Life played out like a movie, but you can't press rewind. Life played out like a hoochie, quick to give up that behind. Every day relentless like the tide and the time. No escape from the thoughts in your mind. The weight of the world weighing on you like your soul's in a grind. You search for release in a bag that's a dime. Feeling like nothing you've ever felt, it's so sublime. You don't even notice the prison you're now inside. No visitors allowed who don't buy your lies. You're in solitary lockdown, so no going outside. And none of this was mere circumstance. It was all by design. Invisible hands set it all in motion before your time. My name is Kufikiri Imara. Just a little background on that in of itself. Because when I often introduce myself, people tend to want to follow up with, oh, well, are you from East Africa? And I tell them, no, I'm from East Oakland. And then the face does the whole Cirque du Soleil thing, and the eyebrows do the caterpillar thing. And they're like, okay. I'm like, yes, there's a story there. So what I'm wearing today is not mine. As the legacy that I carry, that's embodied in it. This is my father's, who also gave me my name. And him and my mother, long story short, both born in the early 1950s here in San Francisco, came of age in the 60s and had a family in the 70s. So for them wanting their children to be aware, again, having an intention of awareness of a legacy beyond these shores, they gave their children Swahili names. So before I was even here, I knew that there was a legacy. I knew that there was something on my shoulders to carry. Them being birthed out of the civil rights and Black Power movement of the 60s, though that's only, again, a continuation of a legacy of civil rights fight that's been going on in different manifestations, specifically with regards to this country for many, many years. So I come to an understanding of perception, which I think a lot of what we're talking about today really deals with, whether it's addressing it from the experience of psychedelics or the perception in of itself of those from the outside looking in. Understand that when I look around a room of someone who has this legacy, who was birthed into this struggle, this tradition. And I'm the only one there. And then I turn around and I look over my shoulder and I see my community and I see the benefit and the use and the need that exists there and the disconnect. I'm like, okay, so I guess I'm here for a reason. And I don't know. But in that, I want to take it a step further because I was very conscious of the words I wanted to use in forming my title of Deconstructing False Belief Systems, Upholding Racial Barriers in the Psychedelic Community. In that, being birthed in a legacy of civil rights and Black power, and having grown up with that, but in a new age and taking it a step further, I myself see race as a social economic tool, a construct, created to divide, and as a form of identity in and of itself comes in with predispositions and is very limiting. It's basically like a measuring stick. So I would pose the question of, when talking about diversity, what is that tool, that measuring stick? What is that metric? Who's the one asking the question? How are they defining the answer? How are they defining success in that answer? Race as opposed to ethnicity. If I go to Africa, I'm not a Black man, I'm an American. Just something to think about. So as we look at wanting to be more inclusive, more diverse, and having discussions of what that looked like, is it a journey? Is it a destination? Who gets to decide what success looks like in that regard? Especially when an umbrella term of psychedelic community in and of itself encompasses so many various communities that face their own different challenges, as opposed to the challenges they face within themselves, but also the challenges of inclusion and diversity in and amongst themselves. What does diversity look like to an indigenous people who aren't from America? What does diversity look like in an academic institution? What does diversity look like in the underground? The metrics that we can use to try to define that will differ depending on who's asking the question and where we're standing when we ask that question. So you can say, oh, this academic institution has never had a person of color or never had a woman before. Now we have one. Hey, all right, tell everybody to go away. We hired a woman and a person of color. And if we did a good job, they were the same person. Pat on the back, keep it moving. The thing I think we sometimes are quick to step over in this conversation of itself is that diversity is a luxury of those that are included, and it's a necessity of those that are excluded. So the communication that happens between these two groups is because we are all aware of the fact that it's not happening naturally of its own accord. So why? Are we part of keeping that as it is? Are we part of changing that? What are the intentions in wanting to create that? Because my perception is that it's not about having better gatekeepers. Why have a gate? Again, just throwing it out there. I'm not here to really provide solutions, answers, resolutions. I'm really wanting to as going deeper beyond my title, uniting voices in the ongoing discussion of the challenges around inclusion with regards to race and psychedelics, to broaden the perceptions and erase predetermined conclusions, to foster deeper work to establish lasting practices that create greater diversity in the psychedelic community. It's an ongoing discussion. There are forever challenges. As soon as we feel like we have someone over here included, there's someone over here who feels like they're not included. Is it inherent that in any type of institutionalized structure, we can't bring everyone in, but does that mean institutions are inherently wrong in that regard and that there's no good work that can come from them? Do you have to be an institution to fight an institution? So in that, I think when we say psychedelic community, we need to look at that history of the term, the history of what that means. And it's such a free-form moment that's happening right now. There's so many people that are attaching onto it and sticking onto what works for them and what it means for them. And then they run into somebody they've never met before that's like, oh yeah, I'm part of the psychedelic community. Like, really? I didn't see you before where I'm at. It's like, oh, well, I'm over here in this other place. Oh, well, I'm over here. Oh, well, discourse and dialogue happens. So when we say psychedelic community, what do we really mean when we say that? What does that entail? Who's in that image? As questions posed to you by some of the other panelists, in those moments with yourself, and you say, and you think, just in a phrasing, as we are in the sophist society, psychedelic community, what images come to mind? And to touch on something that was spoken about in the panel before ours, stigma, internal and external stigma. Medical, recreational, ceremony, not ceremony. These are in themselves forms of diversity. These are of themselves forms of inclusion or non-inclusion. And that in and of itself is something that even trying to wrestle with internally as a community can take in so many disparate ways, let alone when you get to government perception versus public perception versus internal perception. If it's about adding more voices to the conversation, then it needs to be more than about just listening to the voices that are already a part of the conversation. We need to be listening for the voices that aren't there, asking ourselves why they're not there. What can we do to bring them in? And not just bring them in for our own sense of now that you're here, but in a way of inclusiveness of you are welcome and wanted and required to move things forward. And something that was also spoken earlier that I want to address on the previous panel. In stigma, tying back into the construct of race, drugs, as soon as you say go into a community of Black people, African Americans, Negroes, whatever term best suits you or them in that moment, because it's all flux and fluid and it's never going to be full encompassing. People of color, we've been colored, call us people of color, keep it moving. It's about the intention and the awareness. So when you go into these communities and you're talking about drugs and you're talking about the medical professional field and you're in your space of my well-meaning and my well-intention and the good that this can do for society, but you're not meeting them with where they are. Or you're saying, hey, we need some of these people over here, but let's pluck the ones that we want from there and then bring them over here and then say, hey, tell us about over there. Thanks. Okay, now go back. Now we are informed. It's an ever-evolving, again, it's an ongoing discussion, and the challenges are varied and many, but they're not unconquerable. And of course, when we overcome one challenge, there'll be one after it. So that's why it's a journey. That's why it's not a destination. That's why it's about communication. Communication doesn't have an end. I once had a boss tell me, until you get a response, it's not communication. You can send an email, you can post a memo, you can send a text, you can call someone and leave a voicemail, but until you hear back from them, until you get a response, it's not communication. So if we're just throwing words into the wind, but we're not actually having discourse and hearing back from others who we want to say are welcome or we're looking to invite into this, then who are we really communicating with other than people who are saying the same thing as we're saying, but maybe just dressed up looking a little different than we would? So I would leave you with these questions instead of answers, in hopes that they will spark a moment of pause and reflection in those little moments of our day and our life where no one's looking, and it really wouldn't matter socially, government-wise, change, revolution, justice, how we make that decision, except internally. Carrying these questions forward in those moments to give us a chance to be more aware, more open to receiving something that maybe we just brushed by before. And if we can take that intention forward after conferences like this, so we're not just here talking, preaching to the choir, and we're actually engaging with people who might have opposing views, not feeling like we need to be challenged by it or them to be challenged by us, though simply, again, to create the dialogue and the discourse of how we can bridge between communities, and thus diversity can happen almost organically without it being a case of quota systems. We've been there. I know about it. It didn't work. It's a false optic. We need to move beyond false optics. Something real only happens if it's internal out instead of external in. So I hope that with all the wonderful speakers and all the wonderful presentations we had this weekend, all the different subjects and matters that were highlighted here, we take this as an initiative beyond this weekend going forward to be our own agents of change in little and big ways in our life. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm feeling so much gratitude for this space to be able to hear your voices and hear these stories. This space is not missing not only in other psychedelic conferences or events that I've been to, but certainly many academic and scientific gatherings. I feel like, queer people, like in the last panel, sexual minorities and people of color are seem to be an afterthought. So I'm feeling a lot of gratitude for this space. Something that you said, Madrone, really stuck out to me about harvest as this time of abundance and death. And so it feels like a time of harvest. There's plenty of abundance in our society. And I think that we're all here because we value transformation and growth. And so this question is for you, but also for everyone on the panel. Using this definition of harvest, what do you think needs to die? What do we need to let go of? Sorry, I'm a psychologist.
What do I think needs to die in terms of the birthing of something? Harvest?
Yeah, in terms of the harvest of the transformation that we need to see, the context here is in the psychedelic community, right? To be able to have more inclusion in this community and in the research that we're doing and sharing that abundance, sharing that harvest with the people who really need it. What needs to die, or what do you think we need to let go of?
I would have to say the death of ignorance from within of the not knowing and the death of fear, because fear can be really the opposite of love. And if we allow ourselves to let go of that, I think we can then embrace the unknown. Is that a little too deep?
I think what needs to die are more birds so I can have more feathers. And I could pass these things out to everyone. What needs to die, seriously, is our ignoring of our connection to the earth in all of these studies, even with compounds that are synthetic, that the connection to the earth and what we're doing to our environment needs to be paid attention to. So I guess ignoring it is what needs to die, so that we can remember who we are and our connection to the cosmos and to our living Earth Mother.
Thank you. So I'll open it up to the audience. Any questions? I see a hand over here, 2 hands over here.
Do you find that in the communities that you come from, is there interest among young people in using psychedelics in general? And a second question, which comes out of discussions I've had with friends who are Black in New York, do you ever run into a perception that there are drugs for white people in your community?
Absolutely so. And post ceremony, we all are familiar with the ayahuasca preparation process. Well, maybe most of us in this room. After one ceremony, I had someone break open a box of chicken. I mean, it sounds horrible, but it's not part of the dieta. So you're introducing people that have absolutely no context for what it is that you're doing. And so when I show up, the way that I show up, it looks like a character or something of the sort until after the ceremony, and then they're like, "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry that I thought you were faking or that I doubted what you were doing." So it's at this level, it's an introduction to the communities, and so we start with something, Vine of the Soul or some information online from maps or something. We share that, and even still, they're like, "Oh, that's for white people," like the yoga and the meditation is for white people. It's for white people, and so it takes a while to break all of that down. But there is, without exposing anyone, there is some headway being made in that area.
As I can't speak as far as any personal direct knowledge as far as youth interest in psychedelics for any specific community. I think a lot of the perception amongst youth regarding that is shaped by a lot of entertainment, a lot of lack of knowledge and knowledge sources. So not having proper information can leave anyone to be ignorant of a subject matter, regardless of the age. And as far as Black communities in specific, with regards to seeing psychedelic as a white drug, I think that gets into questions of social identity, because when you live in a society where you are at risk for harm because of how you look, someone says, lose your awareness for even a minute, is taking a risk for their life to some degree, perceptually or actually physically and literally. So in meeting them with where they are, to understand that this is something that is beneficial and helpful isn't a conversation that's going to happen like a Saturday morning cartoon where they get it in 30 minutes with commercial breaks. They need to, it's about challenging their perception of themselves as well as challenging the perception of the plant medicine and its benefits and what it can do.
I have a statement and a question. So first, my statement is in reaction to a question that happened on a panel before, and that was, can white people decolonize themselves, especially in the context of us having a presentation about decolonizing. And I want to say that white people will never colonize so they cannot decolonize. That's appropriation of language from people of color. But white people can't stop colonizing, and they can unlearn colonizing behavior. So I just wanted to say that publicly because it kind of pissed me off. And my question is, I mean, I hear all of you talking about ways that you're operating outside of these systems, whether it's growing your own food or challenging your privilege or having underground housing or having underground ceremony. And we know that these systems were never made for us. And if anything, they were specifically made to oppress us. So can we actually, when we have questions about access, when I have questions about access, does it actually make sense to do it within these systems, or is it freedom from regulation and oversight that will really allow us to truly access the psychedelic community?
I hope it's okay if I make a comment about your comment. So no answers, just a comment. I'm really glad that we're in a space that we can talk like this, first of all. I also want to say, perhaps it's because I kind of walk the line between colors, race, ethnicity, whatever, that I can think this way, and I hope that you will indulge me in just hearing me out about this. I don't take offense when I hear a white person say that they're oppressed and that they feel excluded and colonized, because there are different aspects to a human being, to a person, like being trans, being gay, being lesbian, being anything that is not the norm. And it feels bad to be excluded. It feels bad to feel like you don't belong, like you're bad according to the system. And that is exclusion. There is a colonization of individuality according to the powers that be, and even white people suffer. And I think that if we start, I should speak for myself, I feel if I then exclude the suffering of another because of their color, then am I not doing the same thing that I'm up here talking about? And I think the whole point is to work together. Because if we then start pointing the finger, guess what? Three pointing back at you. I know, because when I've done the medicine, it points back at me. It's like, right. It's like, oh, really? How about you? But I respect what you said, because there is a time and a place to have a platform, and people of color need to have this time now. But if we don't work together, and if we don't see the humanity in the various ways of colonizing, in the various ways of taking over of a person's growth and freedom, then we might as well just go home.
I think to your question, it's framed around, and if I may, just using words to kind of describe your question, not to put any words in your mouth, institutions and systems and change, whether you want to be a rebel and you're working inside for change, or you're a revolutionary on the outside and want to rip the whole thing down, I think that is a question of access as far as how you would fall on that question, and personal experience as far as what, do you throw the baby out with the bathwater, or is there something to save? I don't think there's a one straight answer for that, because there's truth in everything, though it's not always apparent and easy to filter out. Not much on like a journey. So people's opinions on that will differ depending on access. If you feel like you're someone who has an avenue of access, you might be more inclined to say there's ways to change without totally tearing it down. If you're someone who's felt excluded and never had a chance to get any of that sunshine and what feels good on the green side of the grass over there, then you're all fine for tearing it all down and starting over again.
So I was wondering if I had some concern about how, especially white people in power, will interpret the words access and inclusion. That often I think that means come join what we're already doing without us having to change anything. And so I wonder if you could just clarify a little bit what access and inclusion really mean to you. Like what does that require of the people who currently have access?
How do you tell somebody what it's like somewhere they've never been? It's experiential knowledge. You can tell them all you want about what it means to stand on the beach and watch the sunset over the ocean, but if you've never lived on the west coast of a continent, you've never seen it. Somebody could tell you what it's like to be a parent, but until you've had a child, you have no idea. And only way to garner that is through experience, is through putting yourself in those places. If you're someone who feels you have access or has been shown that you have access to things that others don't, go to where the people don't have access and see why they don't have access. If you want to be an agent of change about that, then you can connect the lines and the dots that they can't because they're on the outside. They only know how to get in through opposing themselves to the resistance that they feel that's keeping them out.
The shortest way to figure out what to do or what is required is to go into the neighborhoods where you feel like your life is threatened, and while in them, try to shift your reaction to Black and brown people and see with an open heart just what is happening there. And the answers will become clear to you on what to do. Period. Gotta go there.
So that may be an answer to the question that I'm about to ask. First of all, thank you all for each of your contributions. I really appreciated each of them. But my question is around, well, first of all, if you think that it would be helpful for people of color to be included in the research that's happening now to kind of change this gap that you spoke about and I did yesterday. What are your thoughts on both kind of how to bring more people of color into the research, both as therapists and also as participants, and also how you might want to or envision shifting the research to make it safer and more accessible. You mentioned one thing about kind of the way that diagnoses are made, but just other thoughts on that as well.
It will take white people to let go of the savior complex. Just let go of it. And teach what you have been taught. Give back what you have been given. I went online and read something on MAP's website and reconnected with my ancestors. And so now when people come to my circle, they have someone that looks like them doing the work. And then there is no need to go into the study to do anything. We already know this works.
I don't know what I can add to that, but I just want to say that it definitely is going to be having a compassion for what you don't understand. Someone's experience, someone's choice of words. If somebody's pissed off, let them be pissed off and use those words of being pissed off. And I think that it can really change. I think that having compassion towards someone who is different, a set of people who you don't even want to get to know because maybe you're afraid, maybe they're really sick, maybe they're ill, and they look at it and you're afraid that you're going to be somehow infected. And of course, I'm speaking also metaphorically. Unless you put yourself before that person, you won't know what it is that is keeping you from fully understanding and then fully engaging with that person and that community and that world. And it may take getting out of a comfort zone. Of course, I think also now the multicultural teachings in psychology, master's programs. I'm in a master's program now at Columbia, and that's a big thing. It's, everyone has to take these courses, and I don't think it was this way even 5 years ago, I think. And so I think that is already changing things. I think it's helping, for example, therapists to learn how to reach Latino communities and that it's okay if they ask you where you're from as you're walking from the weight room to your office. Are you married? You may have to say like, oh, what does that mean to you? But it's important that you not draw that line right away that maybe works for certain communities, that it won't work. I can tell you will not work for Latinos. And also people, like therapists are used to calling clients by their first name. And if it's the first time you're meeting someone, even if they're around your age, it may actually be better if you say, Miss So-and-so, and then they'll say, no, call me whatever. Even little things like that, they really help to shift the whole paradigm of respect. And then from there, I think lines of communication will open, at least with the Latino community. So I think just getting out of our comfort zones, asking what works for you, what do you envision, and doing our homework about the culture, I think can really help us to bridge that gap.
Short answer, risk takers. People willing to put their neck out there. Because when you enter, because like I was saying, diversity will look something different depending on where you are. If you're in an academic institution and you're doing medical research, budget's boss. Who's signing that check that allows you to turn the lights on and even do what you're doing has influence on the work you're doing. If you're someone in the underground trying to bring communities together that are not being represented, not being seen, what does diversity and access look like that, and trying to pull people and work through against stigmas like the gentleman was talking about, where like you have young people of color and they're like, well, it's a white person drug, man, I'm not showing up now. Or you're in an institution and it's like, yeah, no, we would totally love to do this and go into this community and do that. Oh, but the person signing off on our grants doesn't like that. So maybe we save that for next time.
And maybe just to add to that, thank you for all of your responses. Given that some of you had mentioned that people in your communities see these things as what white people do, do you have ideas about kind of how to shift that? If you think it's important to shift that, how to start to shift that?
The shortest answer is time. Just time, more time together, more time learning from each other, and the color of it will change.
I just want to give a message from Cristala. She was on the panel originally, so she's Native American and she's a pietist, and she couldn't afford coming last minute, and that's really sad. And she sent a big hug for everybody, and I just want to note that was missed, and that is noted. And I think that Native American people in the U.S. are even maybe lower in terms of any kind of respect or acknowledgement. And we did have a Wirarika person here in the first day, Auke or Huichol, But I think that the gap of Native American people in the psychedelic movement is even more shocking, especially if you consider that peyote is the sacrament per excellence of this land, and especially if you consider the scarcity that peyote is facing and the ecological threats, the deep, endangerment that peyote is, and the real bad situation of Native American peoples towards that sacrament. And we have tried to create a little bit of those bridges in the last psychedelic science conferences, and I consider that you have been successful. I agree with you when you say, well, what kind of bridge is that? We go there and we bring these people here. Like, this is not even their format. How are you going to tell elder indigenous person, you have 20 minutes, 18, 15. To that I answered, teach us, help us, because that's what I know how to do. And I don't know too much more than that, but I agree with you. But we also need guiding and teaching, and that's welcomed.
Questions? Yeah, I'll say something briefly. Is that I've been sitting here and reflecting that every door that I've had into the psychedelic community, all of them have been, I'd say, white friends or family. Every single person I can think of, and I have gratitude, but also I can see how that would be a hurdle for a lot of people to feel like once they're in the room, it's looking around, it's always all white. That doesn't feel good. That feels alienating. That feels scary. Feels re-traumatizing. So that's a hurdle, and I am very concerned about that moving forward, and I certainly don't have any answers to that, except going back to the idea of passing the baton, and I guess encouraging, if there are folks coming to you, if you're a therapist or if you're a researcher or if you're someone in the community and you can mentor someone who is of color, who is queer, or someone who needs just to feel safe and welcome. I think compassion and love really do go pretty far.
Finding people that can be that bridge, because even finding someone in a community of people of color and saying, oh, they're in that community and they do what I do, so that's the gateway in, though they may even to some extent feel their own version of exclusion in their own community because of that. Like, oh, I'm the person of color who does psychedelics, but so when I go to my neighborhood, everyone's looking at me crazy because I'm the person of color who does psychedelics. So it's that narrative, and it's that perception of the other that needs to be worked at and broken down. And even if you're coming to someone with help in your perception of my intentions are well-meaning, I'm coming to you with help. If you can't see how they're seeing you, then there's always going to be a gap in communication.
Hi. First of all, I wanted to thank you for all your words today. They were very encouraging and inspiring. And my question is perhaps a little bit naive. I want to know, what happens after the healing process begins, especially in communities, in poor communities, and where people have been traumatized and re-traumatized. Is there anything for them to go? It's different when you go back to your poor neighborhood. After you started healing, then, going back to your apartment, perhaps in here in San Francisco or elsewhere.
I can say it's purely anecdotal, but I'm thinking of my dad who did LSD back in the day, and that put him on a lifelong spiritual path. And yeah, so it was definitely life transforming, and he never made any money, but he has the value of his spiritual practice.
I don't live in a poor neighborhood.
Do you work with people who live in poor neighborhoods?
Well, but you said, what does it feel like when you go back to your poor neighborhood?
No, what kind of support system is there?
In my poor neighborhood. In my poor neighborhood. I don't live in a poor neighborhood. And I wonder why you thought that I lived in a poor neighborhood.
Yeah,
I would like to.
I wasn't speaking about you, I was speaking about your client. The person next to you spoke about working with people who were marginalized.
Right, but then you also didn't address it to him. So what I would like to say is that there comes a time whenever everything that we're talking about kind of erupts into this boil, and I think it just did, and I thank you for that. Boils hurt, but how do you heal if it doesn't pop? Sometimes I've said something that has been like that, and it's an assumption that people of color are poor, or that we work with poor clients, or whatever. But I just want to say that I have said things like that, and I have made assumptions, and it's not going to be the last time. And I think that the more that we call it, and the more that we embrace the person and those ideas, and then let go of it, because I hope I can hug you after. Whatever.
I think you misunderstood me, but
it's possible. It's possible, yeah. And if so, I'm sorry. Yeah. But I want to take that opportunity to say that whenever something comes up that doesn't fit and that we think should fit, that's the first thing to actually address and to look at.
The demographic that I serve is not completely poor. A client of mine rented a beach house and paid me $500 to do a private ceremony. Not everybody that comes is poor. But to address what I think the heart of your question is, we take care of each other. We have integration circles. We become friends, we become family. So our sister who died of cancer this year, two of the other women in our circle took care of her and moved her into their home, like a community hospice, way beyond their means to actually help. I think it might have been a little more harmful for our friend who passed, but we have to become that. And it's not something that's foreign to Black and brown people to be that. It is woven into us. That's how we have been able to even be sitting here right now.
Any other questions? 2 hands. This one went up first.
Hi, thank you. I want to know about music because you sang and you talked about singing, and you had poetry, and you have these very visually beautiful ways of dressing. So I wondered if you could talk more about the culture in terms of art and in terms of visual culture, and in terms of how inclusion or exclusion is or is not coded in that, in like the visual culture of what you might associate or what is popularly associated or has been associated with psychedelic ceremonies by different people. Like, are there things that you identify with or don't identify with, or, how do you, bring music and things into your practice?
So what is your concise question?
It's not really one thing. It's just basically what you want to say in relation to what I just...
So I'll address the part that I can answer.
Sure.
I think that learning the medicine songs, learning the Icaros are vital to the ceremonial spaces. Even if you're using synthetic compounds, it's very important to sing to whoever it is that you're trying to have open their heart. Even if you feel like your singing is like cats scratching on a board. In that state, no one cares. It's like, it's so lovely, I love you. So you don't sing to people. I think it's vitally important, and have them draw. Which you guys know that already. Just, do the things that the hippies do. Come on.
There was another hand over here.
Hi, thanks for all of your talks were great. I was curious about, this kind of goes back to the question of access and representation and working with someone who looks like you and that feeling of being included in that way. I'm curious about like lineage and elders and like in terms of a cultural lineage in the sense of like it was really striking to me in the last panel to see this history of like the caquettes and this kind of like queer psychedelia from the 60s and 70s. And for me, I can look at that and be like, oh, those people are like, in a way, my elders. Like Allen Ginsberg is like my elder, you know, like I have a sense of identification, you know? And so I wonder about that in terms of who you see as your elders. I know you mentioned Terence McKenna, but and also, of course, there's, you know, the lineage of plant medicine elders, but also in terms of just like the culture of the last few decades, you know, if you feel like there are people that you associate with. I was also thinking about there's kind of like a Sun Ra revival these days, which I think he's such a great figure of a kind of like Black psychedelic artist. But it's like when I think about this sort of like radical politics, there was really a split, I think, in the 60s between the psychedelic use and the more kind of like radical politics. So I wonder, you know, how you make sense of that today in terms of figures you relate to.
Because we've had a lack of representation, your elders are ours as well. And so we've had to, you know, like just stomach that and wait for people to arrive that look like us. So loving Ram Dass and people of the sort and just loving them from a compassionate, open-hearted space and doing our best to see beyond race. But now we're knowing about people like Malidoma Somé from Africa, and we're getting to hear a different side of the story. And for our communities, we are those people who will be elders. We're like, you know, I had my shamanic awakening in the Bronx in Tremont, rough neighborhood, with an old friend who had been to prison, and you know, like that's where we're waking up. And one of the first messages from the mushroom, which is very hard to accept when I first heard it, is that we choose the conditions of our awakening. Collectively, individually, we choose the conditions of our awakening on a soul level before manifesting in this body. And so I hold on to that, and it helps me not be bitter, not be so angry, and feel strong enough to show up.
The split that you referenced is due exactly to the uneven weight of the gavel that falls of judgment in this country based on the color of your skin. So I was fortunate enough some years back, a panel that actually Cristie was on as well. There was a gentleman, Baba, who was in the civil rights movement and was on his own individual personal journey with psychedelics, but he couldn't talk about that amongst people in the civil rights movement because they'd be like, "You're risking our lives." Like, no, like this isn't the time to be like laying down and hearing music and you know, being all like love and we're all one. No, we're getting killed out here. So that the space for that type of duality, if you will, as far as like being in these two different places of in a community that is suffering and primary concern is about survival, and being in a place of this is healing and open access and being able to be mind expanding. Those, like you said, those elders don't exist because that's never existed before.
I have to say, I think all of my psychedelic ancestors, if I think about them, are honestly white. So Starhawk, Terence McKenna, Aldous Huxley, Wavy Gravy, and the list goes on. But yeah.
Other questions? There's a hand over here.
Hi, my name is Jiro. And again, okay, just a short. My organization is now working on diversity. What we are waking up is pretty much almost all people of color is Asian in our organization. So something, anything, advice or comment, anything around there?
How do you feel about it?
Okay. Thank you for asking. Yes, one part of me think that it's okay. It's sad. You know, almost we couldn't talk about people of color thing in the organization. But the other part of me is happy that white people did stretch enough so that at least Asian people are there. So that's kind of what was ambivalent thing.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you, it sounds like you're satisfied or happy with the quote-unquote inclusion. Is that correct? This is a conversation.
Yes, one part of me is great, you know, it did happen. Asian people there. It's okay. And one more thing maybe I can say is maybe in one part of me think it's white people can stretch more so that more diverse people can join, but other part of me think maybe as model minority, like Asian people have lots of resource, and also I do notice that the privilege to like any meeting say, hey, this is a people of color meeting, then I can show up. Then whoops, just all black people. I'm the only Asian, but it's okay. I'm people of color. That's kind of thing. Very complex. Did I answer your question?
Yes. No, thank you, and I'm so glad you shared that. I do think that we can stretch more. We meaning like just a community to embrace people that have different cultures and speak different languages, and maybe they look different, maybe they don't. So I'm really glad to hear that your company is being more inclusive, and certainly people of color are anyone I believe that can relate to that. So I'm glad that you're happy with that.
Your comment actually reminds me of an instance where, when working in a different capacity in events, I was in a financial corporate institution, and they were actually doing a workshop amongst their employees about the image and optics for diversity. And in this individual, this specific workshop, the question that the presenter opened up with is, what does Asian person look like? And they had a picture of someone from what we might, in our social concept, think of someone who's Asian, and then we're pointing at countries like Japan and China and Korea. Yet his had images of people from Russia and Uzbekistan and India and the Southeast Asia. So that perception of Asian, that perception of people of color, it's very much defined by the history of, specifically in this country, of it being so long the narrative so stark of white, black. And everyone else who felt excluded kind of hitching their train, their little caboose to like what was going forward and what was moving forward the farthest. Like, okay, all right, so they give a little something to these people over here. Let's run in through the door with them and get a little something too. Okay, and like, oh, okay, they're giving a little something to these people here. Let's get a little something to that too, and run over here. Because in that your question, you're exposing in and of itself the preconceived notions people have of what diversity is, what is Asian, what is a person of color. So I think that's a great opportunity actually to push back on that and to redefine that.
Not push back, but include.
Include.
It's simple. Thank you very much. We're inclusive. There's no pushback.
Oh, yeah, I noticed way we talk. Oh, I start we, but I like our communication the communication happening style a little bit changed.
So I'd like to add that there's a conversation that needs to happen in the communities that you're speaking about, because sometimes we get a little caught up in the nomenclature. I know some words. Yeah. So you have to speak to your people, and because sometimes you get to be race neutral, if you will, and there's the stereotype of being smart as opposed to being a thief and a drug dealer. And so you get to be, I get to be with white people, or I get to be over here. So there's a conversation that needs to happen with your community about where they would like to be included as well. That is not just on our side, it's also on your side. Because I've had conversations with people and where I'm like, I'm trying to like, hey, so the struggle of people of color and so on, and I've been looked at by someone from the part of the world that we would usually associate visually as Asian, and have said, I don't know what you're talking about, this people of color thing. Which is shocking to me, but it is a thing that is there.
Yeah. I feel like I want to continue more dialogue, but also I like to other people.
There's a hand over here.
I want to thank you for your presentations and for putting your heart in your words, and that's to all the presenters. One of the things that we've been talking about is the how, and I just wanted to share, it's not even a question, but I just wanted to take this moment to share that I'm a Peruvian woman, so I'm a woman of color. I'm half white or Hispanic, and half Indian, although I don't look it. So I feel like I've always been in the role of mediating, because I can feel both sides, although I look a certain way. And what I was trying to say is, like, we always ask the question, how can we start change? And I think that change starts with us. So going to the places, maybe with somebody that can guide us or not, with friends in whatever context that feels safe, but go and internally and resolve all the battles that we have inside, because anything that is exposed right now, or that we've been talking about differences and races and things, we all have that internalized. So if we can make peace with our own ways of discrimination, with our own ways of how we feel separate from our culture, from a group, from a family. I have a daughter, and she's half, her father is white, and so she's half white and half Latina. Her girlfriend is black, and half Native American. And my daughter's half-sister is completely white. I live in a home with my ex-husband. He's white. And one of the things that I've done is try to have moments where, maybe at dinner, maybe at going for an outing, that people can really start talking about the importance of not excluding somebody by their look, or not excluding somebody by the, who is representing them, but as an inclusion of, the more we resolve ourselves, we can teach that to our kids. If we want to be included, let's start including. If we want to not have racism be a part that is affecting all of us because it affects all of us, well, then let's start giving our kids, giving ourselves the opportunity of hanging out with all the races that we can, get to know who they really are, be open, and have a community, create a community that is diverse. My household is a diverse household. And it is challenging at times. I mean, everybody has feelings about different things, because of where, how they look or how they grew up. But I think if we have a place that not only normalizes everything, but includes, there's nothing wrong with it. Everybody can participate, just being them. So I just needed to say this because I find myself also like, how do I belong? And it's by showing up and, being open to the rest. Thank you.
Thanks. I think there's some responses.
My only response is that we have been here a long time and I am hungry. Because I usually fast for things like this, in all seriousness. So, yeah.
I'm going to make a comment again and also ask for the panelists to talk specifically about power, because I think that that's something that is kind of underlying this questions about who gets in, who gets out, who's excluded, who's included, and the call for people of color who have less power to try and make a way for themselves with people who have power. And so if we just talk about what power looks like in this space for psychedelics, and also one other comment about my comment that was responded to with a comment. European civilizations were never colonized by people of color. So when I say that white people cannot be decolonized and they have to stop colonizing, yes, decolonization is for people who have actually been colonized, and that doesn't mean that we all don't suffer at the hand of that decolonization or of that colonization. So I just wanted to say that, and then also hear specifically about power.
I think it's in and of itself, it's a loaded term, power. Because as soon as you say power, automatically in someone's mind, there's a divide as to the have and the have-nots. And I remember telling my young nephew growing up, get rid of the idea of the man. There is no more the man. It's about have and have-nots. The man could be a woman. The power wants more power. The powerless want more power. It's a cycle. What do we want ultimately? If it's about spreading power around to those who don't have it from those who do have it, what are we solving or what are we resolving? Is it just simply saying, okay, these people didn't have power, now they have power. These people had too much, now they don't have too much. Who's deciding on what equality looks like? Because power always leans one way or the other. It's never going to stay level in the middle. It's the reason why there's the cliche, power corrupts, because as soon as someone gets a seat at the table, their first concern is self-preservation, to stay at the table. It's not about like, oh, now that I'm here at the table and I have access and I came from a community that didn't have access, now let me reach back to the people who don't have access and risk my opportunity to have my own access.
But that's when there's scarcity, right? Like, we're talking about a balance of power, but there is no scarcity.
In an ideal situation, right? If we're talking in theoretics and academics, but if we're talking about human beings with personal agendas and institutions with institutional agendas, and we're talking societies with societal agendas, if we're working through a history that we can't detach ourselves from because of the nature of reality, there's a past that exists that we've come from. There's a future we're trying to reach for. We're standing here in the present moment right now where our power exists to make anything happen. So that's why I say even in of itself, the term power is loaded, because power is never going to give of itself, and it's never going to be equitable outside of theory, outside of theoretical, because human nature, because people, because Lord of the Flies, power vacuums. Oh, no one else wants to be the big dog here? I'd take that.
I'll take it.
I'm good. I get bossed up. I'll do that. But what is the motive for wanting power? What is the intention behind it? What do you want to do with it when you have it? I think going deeper into the why of the power and not just the what of it, you can find avenues of resolving what maybe is really deeper the intention of what you want to accomplish, besides just having your name on the door and being the boss.
I wondered if we can substitute the word power for agency. If agency can just substitute that, perhaps if we all had even some of that, perhaps we'll be in a better world. Agency.
We're out of time for today. Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you for the discussion.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a closing of this event, so I'm gonna close saying thank you in Portuguese. Obrigado pela presença, foi realmente uma aventura maravilhosa e eu estou muito feliz, acho que é um grande sucesso. So thank you very much, I'm pretty happy, I think we all accomplished a lot. I want to make a series of acknowledgements to people that have helped, but before I'm going to take my power and use it to make a little propaganda of the things that I'm working on. So I just want to say that I'm working on a peyote documentary talking about conservation. I'm trying to fundraise $10,000 if there's any philanthropists that are interested in the project. I also want to encourage people to talk to the Soltara folks over there. I'm helping them create ayahuasca retreat for psychedelic therapists, because I think it's good that people who want to have experiences actually do have them, so to work on their healing and better understand their patients. And also want to invite everybody to support me at Chacruna. We have a fiscal sponsor that is MAPS. Thanks, MAPS. And we can make donations in our site, and also Bitcoins or regular donations. That's entirely voluntary project with 30 volunteers, and we're trying to create a site that conveys knowledge in a more accessible way. I have published between authorships, co-authorships, 20 books so far. I came to the conclusion that people don't read much, and if you make a sexy, cool little video or a sexy blog post, people do read. So I'm moving more towards that public education. Just, trying. So I have a vision for Chacruna to be a kind of maps of plants, of, more shamanism, religion, ritual, anthropology, women, global south, and create it as a nonprofit. I'm trying to see how to advance that. So I welcome volunteers and participation, and also if you want to join our newsletter or my Facebook profile is open. So that was my little self-promotional thing. I want to also invite everybody to our panel here on, I'm going to be teaching a course, Ayahuasca Science and Spirituality in CIAS. I just become an adjunct lecturer here. I'm also it's called Ayahuasca Science and Spirituality, and it starts in September to December. I'm also a mentor in the CPTR program, Janice program, so she's also going to be around after to talk to you about this program. I encourage you to talk to her, and on November 19th, we're going to have a panel on women and psychedelics that is part of the course, but it's also open to other people. And having that said, I just want to thank a lot of people. First, my peers and volunteers in Chacruna and the East-West Psychology Program. the Center for Psychedelic Therapy and Research, psychedelic support, psychedelic safety, support, and integration, Chicago, MAPS, Soltara. And I want to thank Stephen Julich. He's there. Please applaud. He has done everything behind the scenes. So I had told them that was originally one panel, and then I said, can we make it 3 panels? And then I said, well, can you make it 2 days? And they said, no. And then I said, please, 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 I'll do everything. So I lied. Actually, I didn't know it was going to be like that, I swear. But, you know, thank you, Stephen, because it grew exponentially crazy. And the burden was on him a lot. I want to thank him. And Debashish Panerjish, I don't know, he's the director or rector of the East-West Psychology Program. And Janice Phelps, I want to thank her too. I want to thank the webmaster in Brazil, Márcio Luiz. I want to thank Fernando Orozco, my web designer in Mexico. And I want to thank Ali Feducha and Jeff Bate that have been very active in the background, selecting speakers, giving ideas, curating topics. I want to thank Bryce from MAPS that has helped facilitate the filming, and I want to thank Andrew O'Keefe that is back there filming. I want to thank Nikki Sauer that also was lured into an easy task that became a kind of nightmare, which was organizing that dinner. Thank you, Nikki, and Kat Harrison of Botanical Dimensions. And I want to thank Mike Margolis from Psychedelic Seminars for a lot of good coaching and psychological support, and all the volunteers of Chacruna, Amanda Nakoni, Cristie Strongman, Robert Hefferman, Nidia Alveira. I want to thank my personal assistant, Horacio Guevara. Horacio, where are you? Oh, yeah, he's there. So Horacio and I, he's my personal assistant for 3 years, and he flew from Guadalajara here, and he's great. And I thank you a lot. I want to thank Tyler Begg and Kendra Birdsall from Soltara and their courtesy film that they did for us. I want to thank Diana Negrin from the Wirarica Center. I want to thank Clancy Kavanagh, that is also co-editor with me of 8 books and co-associate editor in chacruna.net, and a wonderful human being. And I think that's it. I want to thank the volunteers of CIIS. Maybe we can have them stand up. The people that have been in the tables or in the dinner. I don't know if you're around, or probably they are. Thank you. Yeah.
And I would invite you to thank Dr. Bia Labache for convening this conference so well. Let's give a round for Bia.
C'est fini.